Yes, I really hope so. And what I would say for anyone fretting about peat and smoke and just being a bit unsure about whether this is for them, I would say lend us your taste buds for one night and we will try and convince you.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike Pizarro's just poured them and he says his lounge smells of smoke and toffee now. As long as you didn't pour them on the sofa or something, but it's smelling that bad. Jeff's been a trial keeping. He's been a trial keeping in the Highland Park for so long without opening it. Absolutely. David Stanton, evening everyone. Looking forward to these two whiskies. Ian Jambo Rain, welcome back, Ian. Evening all. Good to be back again. Agree with the Jeffster all about the Starwood. That was really good. Yes, it was. We had some great drams last time, but our Pour and Sip exclusive was particularly fabulous.
Oh my gosh, wasn't it beautiful? I will say more of these, please. More exclusives.
Yes,
it was so much
Pour
fun.
and Sip exclusives coming your way. It's going to happen. Mike, I'm really glad I held some Starwood back. I enjoyed it much more on the second visit. That's often the case with whiskey. Actually, I find particularly when you get a new bottle that you're super excited about, you open it up, you pour a dram, and you're not totally blown away by it. And then you come back to it after it's gone down a tiny little bit. It's had some time to kind of air and stuff. And then you do kind of enjoy it quite a bit more, actually, to be honest with you. So it's always not on first, once you've opened the bottle and poured it straight away. Sometimes it can take a bit of time to open up. Yoza Hughes saying, Mike, mine are poured and getting a little breather out of the bottle. Ooh. Also got a small Aberfoyles to start the evening off.
I like that you've got a warm-up dram for your whiskey taste.
Yes.
I'm here for this.
I had a warm-up dram tonight, I have to say.
What was your warm-up dram?
It was sent to me. It was I got sent from the Lakes, like a kind of mixture of all their blended whiskey.
Oh, wonderful.
Drinking the Moscatel and the orange wine cask one, which we actually had here on our first pour and sip box.
Indeed, it was one of our drams. So if you are a vintage pour and sipper, if you've been here since the start, you may have tried Andy's very dram that he has right there.
Yeah. Have you had a warm up dram, Christy?
I did.
Yeah.
I was very on brand, and I had a single grain.
Okay, very nice.
It was I feel like it was one of the Label 5 ones, just to throw a bit of a curveball in there, because I love a single grain. I mean, who doesn't?
She's never said, by the way, anyone who's a vintage pour and sip fan, they will know Christy's love for single grain whiskey.
Yes, indeed. But my other favourite category of whiskey, because you can't pick one, you can't have just one. Everyone knows that I adore single grain. I also adore peated drams, which is why I'm very excited for this evening, because I'm sorry, it's November, bonfire night's been and gone, we need the smoke, it's seasonal. 'Tis the season for peated drams, but when isn't it, to be fair?
Yes, and great segue, by the way.
Great segue.
And more comments coming in. Jambo Rain's got high hopes for both. Green Tea is Green. Hi all, welcome back. Green Tea is Green. Green Tea is Green is back, talking about yourself in third person after two unavoidable conflicts last two sessions. Well, welcome back, Green Tea.
We are pleased to have you back. And we should extend the welcome to all our pour and sippers, actually, particularly if you're brand new. If this is your first tasting with us, I'll tell you how it works. We've got two guests this evening. We have loads and loads of guests for all of our tastings, and we are lucky to have two this evening. We're tasting two drams from the box. We've got the anCnoc, I believe I'm pronouncing it correctly, and the Highland Park, and we're going in that order. So now is the time to ready your tasting glasses, grab some water, get set. The anCnoc and then the Highland Park. Fair warning.
Yeah, and if you are brand new, please do get involved with us in the comments. Please let us know your tasting notes. If this is one of your first live tastings you've ever been to or virtually seen, please get involved with your tasting notes. Let us know what you think about the whiskies. Don't think anything you say is too stupid. We will read it out. There is all subjective, all of this. So please let us know what you're thinking. Malcolm, TACD was at the Lakes Distillery not long ago. Their vodka is incredible, actually. I need to go. That's actually on my list of to-do things soon, especially as in that packet they actually invited. So yeah, anyway, Malcolm Tucker, last year's Highland Park cask strength last November's box. It was in last November's box. Okay.
Wow, a year. How's that?
A year ago was delicious. So hoping for more of the same. Colin Bathgate, really looking forward to these whiskies. Love some peat and love some smoke. El Sutton, I sampled a couple of the Lakes expressions at the Keswick Festival earlier this year. Loved their sherry cask. Simon, glad to be back after missing the live tasting. Welcome back, Simon. And Ian Turner have a bottle of 12-year-old anCnoc. Really, really good.
Wonderful. Two short things before we get going. First of all, if you do happen to miss a tasting, you can watch back on YouTube. So don't let any conflicts, like you missed the party, you can have a belated party, save the drams if you can. And also to say, if you are brand new and you don't know how we roll, we love your questions and comments. We love your questions for our guests. We love your general whiskey musings. Join the conversation. And yeah, we love it. We love having a chat with you all. So get involved.
Peter Gilmore quoting me on my first tasting thing, which is something I must have said. So, thank you very much. If you all want to play a game and comment on all the things that I stumble upon when I'm talking, please do. And Jeffster, when can we have Pour and Sip t-shirts?
I mean, Giovanna and Jake, sort it out. Sort it out. I reckon we should have them, but I'm not promising a t-shirt because I don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. But there is perhaps maybe a prezzy or two coming your way for December. Is all I'm going to say.
Yes. No spoilers. No spoilers.
With that,
Williams think they should be a Christmas prezzy. He's just said, so there you go.
Well, I cannot confirm or deny. I feel like I'm like some sort of like person being quizzed by the paparazzi now. I don't want to let any secrets out the bag. Right, we need to get our first guest on because time is flying already and we have got delicious whiskies to taste. So without further ado, let's bring on Stuart from anCnoc, who's going to have a lovely chat with Andy. Let's see if we can get him. Hello, Stuart. How are you doing?
Hey, everyone. How are we?
I mean, I'm really overexcited for this. I love it. I need to calm it down.
Absolutely. No, I'm looking forward to this Christmas present. I'm sure there was a T-shirt in my box. No. No, no, because I know I'll start fights if I start even pretending. Right.
You need to subscribe for December. Is all I'm going to say.
Yes, absolutely.
Right, I'm going to take myself off and leave you in Andy's capable hands, but I will be dramming along. I've got a little dram right here. So enjoy, and I'll see you back in a bit.
We'll see you soon. Bye. Right. How's it going, Stuart?
It's going great. It's been a really busy day, but you know what the nice thing is? Like travel's been back a bit. Travel for work's been back a bit. So I was in Amsterdam a couple of weeks ago, so it's been really nice and a lot more silver linings and a bit more on the horizon. So that's good.
And I suppose with your job in particular, like traveling is one of the kinds of
I mean, right? I mean, I get paid to drink and travel. I mean, it's
what's not note, please let us know and talk to us just about how you found yourself in your job role that you're currently in as brand ambassador for Inver, and let us know a bit about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I've been working in hospitality for a very long time, so it was originally to kind of pay my way through uni and get a lot of free beers, right? That was the immediate objective with that. But I found that I was quite good within hospitality. I enjoyed it, and I was drinking, and it got to a certain point where, you know, I love most spirits, I love all spirits, right? And how mixable they all are. But it got to a point where I actually went to Gleneagles for a few months. I was a kind of relief staff for them and ended up working as a commis sommelier for them. So I fell in love with the whole concept of wine and sipping and nosing and tasting and everything that came with that, with the culture and the history. But it wasn't until about 18, 19 that I actually fell in love with whiskey. I mean, I used to get, my dad used to hand me a sipper and nose of his whiskey. And I'd be like, how the hell can you enjoy that? You know, it was that way. It's like, oh, it smells the same. And then I think 18 years old, my dad gave me a bottle of Glenmurray to go up to uni with. And I'd finished a report. I finished all my uni work. And I was like, right, I've got absolutely
with a bottle of Glenmurray. I was going up to uni.
I had absolutely no money, and I was like, right, what am I going to do? Like, I've got no money. It's Friday night, and I saw the bottle of Glenmurray. I was like, I'm gonna crack that open. So I ended up drinking it. I'm not going to tell you how much because this is a recorded show. But I drank a significant amount of it and loved it. Absolutely loved it. And then from there, and then compounding with the commis sommelier and nosing and tasting. As a stereotypical Scotsman, I fell back into whiskey and realised that there's so many parallels with the two. The nosing, the tasting, the sense of culture and history that comes with it is massive. So I fell immediately in love with Scotch whiskey. And since 18 years old, I've been exploring, tasting and everything like that. But it was just when I finished university, I went to the brand ambassador programme with Chivas Brothers, with Chivas Regal. So I was in India for just under 2 years as their single malts ambassador for India, Sri Lanka, Nepal. Then I went to Douglas Lane. A lot of people, I'm sure, own Douglas Lane independent bottlers, blenders, where I got to sharpen my teeth and work with 65 plus distilleries. So I got to see how the new make spirit from all these different distilleries went into port casks, sherry casks, or bourbon casks, all these different types of casks, and then at different ages as well. So your understanding of how the new make spirits, these different families and distilleries went into casks, and then that individual family member that I like to talk about it completely changed and opened my mind and understanding of how Scotch whisky interacts. And now I've been with Inverhouse for a while now, and it's a wonderful portfolio of brands I get to work with again. So it's great. It's brilliant.
It reminds me of what's in the portfolio of brands along with anCnoc.
We have Old Pulteney, we have Balblair, Speyburn, anCnoc, which Chris should pronounce correctly, and Croon Gin.
Okay, so we'll need to get Speyburn in a pour and sip box to complete the Inver portfolio, because we've had Balblair, we've had Old Pulteney, so now we're having anCnoc. So anyway,
if I can recommend one, the 15 Speyburn is absolutely delicious.
Well, Giovanna and Jake, that's another thing to get involved, along with the t-shirts. We'd like a 15-year-old Speyburn as well coming up in one of our boxes soon. So for all of those who don't know about anCnoc, tell us a bit about anCnoc, because obviously there's, you know, up to the name change in particular, because that can be quite confusing. So kind of talk to us a bit about the history of anCnoc and how you found yourselves, and when Inver took over, how it kind of changed.
Yeah, I mean, I got this box and I was amazed by it. The production value of this box is brilliant. And I was looking at the card and I was like, what else can I actually tell people that's not covered on this amazing card? You've gone into so much detail.
Assume that nobody's read any of these tasting cards.
and you know what, I'd recommend it, I mean, at least for myself, is don't read the tasting notes. You know, come up with them yourself, and we'll go into that. But anCnoc was established in 1894, and the dram that we're drinking is to celebrate the 125th anniversary of that. So this was released in 2019, and we actually released 2 bottles. Now this is a peat whiskey tasting, and this is very, very classily, very namely named Peat. That's it.
It's
125th Peat. This is called Peat.
So this is
P80.
This is anCnoc Peat.
From the 125th. So we released 2. So we released a 16-year-old, which was a cask. I think it's 53.8%. That was 100% ex-American bourbon. But we were established by John Morris in 1894, and this is the 125th anniversary. And our master distiller is Gordon Bruce. And we have one of the most, I mean, apart from ones that are completely manual, but this is slightly automated. But for an automated distillery, there's still valves that are controlled by hand, and that's purely by choice for Gordon, who likes to have this element. It's like, we can slap an automated valve on this, right? And that's how most distilleries are running. He's like, no. I need to know what's going on with my distillery, and it's so manicured. They take care of it beautifully. They really, really care about it. But the Knock Do thing, because a lot of people kind of confuse this, right? So Knock Do is the name of the technical name of the distillery. We decided to call it anCnoc, which is the Black Hill. So if anyone's been up in that part, so this anCnoc is located, or Knock Do distillery is located in the eastern part of Speyside. So it's almost towards the coast. But it's anCnoc because it's right next to the Black Hill, or in behind it is the Black Hill, which is the Knock. So Knock Do is the actual name of the distillery, but of course, not confuse it, this was a gentleman's agreement way back when for Knock and Do. So there's that separation. So anCnoc is the correct pronunciation, and that's the one that we're drinking.
Okay, and you don't still call yourself a Knock Do distillery at all? It's now just anCnoc distillery, or is it? Yeah,
I mean, it's that way. It's tomato. If you refer to it as Knock Do distillery, people in the know will know what you're referring to. But in terms of the brand is anCnoc, if that makes sense.
Perfect. So before going into this peaty dram, anCnoc Peat, talk to us about the kind of the house character of anCnoc in general, because it's not, you know, this is a kind of a special release as such, as you don't just do peaty whiskey.
Yeah, the interesting thing with anCnoc is that we actually do a variant. So we'll do peated runs and non-peated runs, which I think is arguably quite rare in the whiskey world just now. I mean, you know, the perfect still example is probably Tobermory and Jig, right? Where they're splitting it between the two, and it's the same functioning distillery. But it can be quite costly to do that. Yeah. And I think that anCnoc sits in a perfect place where it's considered probably a craft distillery, where Gordon kind of likes to tweak and mess around with things. So we'll go from an unpeated run to a peated run. I'm sure people will probably know Peat Heart if you're an anCnoc fan, which is one of our staple brands that we're going to be continuously releasing. But then we have anCnoc 12, I heard someone mention, anCnoc 18, which is up my shelf, and it keeps winking at me to not actually drink too much of it on a weekday. But I would argue that it's a fairly, if we look at Glenmorangie being a very light, fragrant, delicate new make spirit, and Macallan being a very oily, dense new make spirit, and neither one is better than the other, just two very, very different sides to it. I would argue it ventures towards the Macallan side, but mid-table in terms of that density. And Gordon's a big fan of introducing into 100% ex-bourbon. But what we have with this peat one, the 125th peat, is predominantly ex-bourbon, ex-American oak, and then finished in sherry casks.
Okay. For how long do you say, or is it?
We don't say, but I mean, we can speculate, right? Because when we talk about peat, I remember doing a tasting when I was in India, and I I woken up very early and we flew out and did this tasting, and the guy said, I love peaty whiskey, but I only drink whiskies that are 21 years or older. I was like, right, well, you don't like peat then? And he was like, no, I love peat. And I went, okay. And I broke it down. I was like, peat is something that's aged out of whiskey. The best time, if you enjoy peat, peaty whiskey and that flavor profile, the best time to enjoy it is between 3 and 10 years old, I would argue, depending on levels of peat and everything. That's the best time to enjoy that peat flavor, right? And he didn't agree with me, and I was like, okay, that's fine. You don't have to agree with me. This is very well known. So I would speculate that we're definitely under the 10-year mark with this, and that's the right thing to do to get that peat flavor from it. I would argue that we're around the 8 to 9 year mark, but with regards to the finishing, this is natural color. Again, we could probably speculate that's decent color for that age as well. And again, working with Douglas Ling, it was great to kind of get that understanding, but that's really good color for a finish. So I would argue we're looking at 2 years. Again, that's pure speculation. Everyone, please let me know what your consideration is. But I would say about 2 years finishing in ex Oloroso casks. But the color from that's great. It's non-chill, 46%, and no caramel coloring.
Yeah, I mean that is a wonderful color considering the age. Obviously, it's deep, rich kinds of. You can instantly see there's been some sherry involved in this, obviously, but it's no caramel coloring. So.
And that's the great thing, we're always drawn to color, right? The color of whiskey. But I've seen whiskies that are 30 years old that are much paler than this, right? And it's, color is a great indication. If there's no caramel color included, there's a great indication of, right, I can analyze my whiskey and I think it's been in this cask or this cask, right? Yeah. So it's really nice to see that. It's quite refreshing to see that. And then non-chill filtered, we're allowing that all those fatty acids and proteins that naturally occur in the cask. But the one thing, and I'm glad we did start with anCnoc. First of all, I get to get my presentation out of the way. Not joking. the real reason I'm glad we started with anCnoc is because this is a different type of peat than arguably. I've actually not had a couple of the drams in the lineup today, which I'm really looking forward to tasting them. But this is a different type of peat. So a lot of people consider peat immediately to be, Lefroy, Ardbeg, medicinal iodine, which I absolutely adore. And again, please never take me as saying that I'm saying one's better than the other. It's always different. Everyone, the only person that can tell you if a whiskey is good is you as an individual. No one else. Don't listen to anyone else. If you like it, you like it. But you get different types of peat. Peat is semi-fossilized plant material, right? So you can get that arguably anywhere. So if you take peat from the coast, it's going to be seaweed and kelp. It's going to be that, probably what most people associate with the word peat. It's going to be that medicinal, iodine-y, lovely, lovely character, but very different. The peat that we're using with anCnoc is mainland internal peat, or inland peat, where it's going to be floral, heather. So what you're going to get, instead of that medicinal note, you're going to be getting more forest fire, smoky, charcoaly smoke. So it's not going to be, so again, what Christy was saying as well, you get so many different types of peat, right? So when people immediately hear that, some people are immediately put off because, their mum or their dad introduced them to whiskey with a 10-year-old cask strength Lefroy, which is an amazing whiskey, but not an introductory whiskey, right? So people who go...
Bizarrely, it kind of was for me. It was the one that really kind of made me love peat.
And I say that as well. My friend Jules, who was on the program with me, she fell in love with Lefroy 10. That was her first whiskey ever, and she fell in love with it, right? So, but I would argue that you two are exceptions.
This is what I said on the last tasting, that we did have a Lefroy 10 cask strength in one of these pour and sip boxes. Yeah. And I am an exception to the rule. Most people are going to try this and go, oh my God, that's horrific. But like you're saying, it's different styles of peat. But I mean, you split your production between peaty runs and non-peaty runs. But the history of anCnoc as well, but dating back way back when, peat was kind of surrounded by where the Knockdo distillery was, right? So this is kind of a celebration of kind of that history.
Yeah, I mean, when you go back, whiskey history is something I absolutely adore. It really dictates where we are now, within the 5 categories, and blended Scotch reaching the heights that it has, 95%. But specifically looking at peat, when you go back to, let's say illegal distillation in the mid 1700s and into the 1800s, everyone would have been peated because it was an ubiquitous fuel source, right? As you say, it was in the surrounding land. So every single whiskey that you can probably think of will have at one point used peat, would have had peated whiskey, because you wouldn't turn up the fact that you have a fuel source literally on your doorstep, right? You have peat bogs for miles in Speyside. And anCnoc would have been historically peated. And as would have much of, or if not all of the neighbouring distilleries would have been peated as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to read out, before we try this, a few of the tasting notes, because I'm missing them because we've been speaking. So I'm just going to read out a few of these because there are quite a lot, and it's going to take me a little bit longer than it usually does on Slack because I'm reading it off of WhatsApp. Ian Jambo Rain, lovely nose on this, great balance between the smoke and some sweetness, maybe a brown spotty banana, certainly not overpowering with the peat. Malcolm, before we talk yet, so the peat, so we talk about peat parts per million. This is at 40?
This is 40, and obviously 40 is the measurement of the barley. Right, 40 is always the measurement of the malt before it goes in, because when we go through distillation, we go through the whole process and aging, that will drop in the final product, right? So whenever you see 40 ppm, that's the measurement of the malt that comes into the distillery, and this goes for all whiskey. It's not a measurement of the final. I would argue the final on this is probably 9 to 11, and again, it's very difficult to tell because I think it's easier to tell with what we're all used to is Islay or stereotypical Islay peat, right? So we're very used. I find it easier to do it with that, whereas mainland peat, it's much softer. So again, it's complete speculation on my part, but I would say anywhere between 8 and 13, and I've given that quite a wide berth purely because of my lack of, I think it's a very difficult one, especially when you're introducing sherry cask in there that will help soften that peat blow.
Absolutely. Malcolm Tucker knows wood smoke, treacle basted, soaked gammon joints. Absolutely getting the kinds of charred meats kind of vibe on this. Bacon. Yeah. I've said this before with peaty, with like kind of Frazzles crisps is always one of the ones I get, those kind of bacon.
Yeah, I got a caramelized smoked crispy bacon when I first opened this up because I've had this poured for a while now, just before the tasting.
Okay, so Reverend Kevin Wright, certainly lovely sweet smoke with sweet caramel toffee in there. Joe F, lots of smoky barbecue sauce on this with a fruity end to the nose. Steve Hickson, why does it make you sneeze when nosing the whiskey? So, maybe you've got a cold, I don't know. Malcolm Tucker, smoked gammon, absolutely. Steve, Ian Jamboree maybe got Steve Hickson maybe got your nose a bit too far in the glass. Try holding back a little. Mike Pizarro, normally peat comes with that beach bonfire aroma, but this is a lot more organic. Almost reminds me of the smell we used to get outside the Mars factory. Mike Pizarro, did you work out for Mars? That is the question. Al Sutton, yes, overripe bananas. Joe F, there's a salty hint in there too, like a gammon actually. Everyone's going with this kind of smoked gammon vibe. Michael Smith, the nose is fantastic, so good. Wood smoked, candied bacon, toasted almonds and dried venison.
Oh, it's a bougie bunch that are...
That is a bougie tasting note if I've ever heard one. Green tea is green. I'm glad you feel the savoury too. Chris Randall, I can smell smoked honey, yet I've never had it before. Steve Coleman Williams, I always come up with my own tasting notes, compare with the cards to see how close we are. That's what you were saying, Stuart. It's a good idea to do that. And then you see what everybody else is saying, and then you can usually go, blimey, I wasn't getting any of those things, to be honest.
No, and you know what, the reason I ask, I always want to start my tasting and say, I'm going to do this very lazily and get you to do the work. And there's a reason I do that, because the cards are brilliant. I always think that's fantastic when we have the tasting notes in the bottle. But when you really think about it, we talk about whiskey being subjective, right? If you read the tasting notes in the bottle, that might be one person's, might be a group of people, it might be the lab experts, but that's, regardless of the fact, that's still their tasting notes. It might be a group of people. But when you work yourself to do the nose, the palate, and the finish, and think about what you're trying to get out or what you are getting out of it, it's much better, because the next time you drink that whiskey or a version of it, then you can compare it, because you'll have an emotional attachment, your own attachment. Whereas if someone says, it's gammon, venison, and salted almonds, it's holy crap, gammon, venison, and salted almonds. The power of suggestion is a big thing.
Absolutely, and it's like it's so much better off sitting by yourself and working out the taste notes that you're getting. Because when you listen to other people, a lot of the time you go, that's what I'm getting. Suddenly I'm getting venison as well, even though I can't remember the last time I had venison, so I wouldn't be able to give you that tasting note. Steve Coleman Williams, holy smoke, the taste is out of this world. My life, I might have found a new favourite whiskey. There you go. Yozza Hughes, nose definitely peat without doubt, with hints of smoked bacon. Again, with smoked bacon, it's really there. Ian Turner, really odd. I'm not getting any smoke on the nose. Anyone else finding the same? That might be interesting to say that, Ian, because it might be what you're talking about is that people are used to kind of smelling a peaty Islay whiskey that's a coastal kind of peat and expecting that kind of medicinal type of smoke. But with this one, you're getting a much more, like you said, the heathery kind of bonfire kind of smell, and then there's smoked meats in there as well. But that could also be misintroduced as kind of maybe cured meats or something like that. But it's not that kind of heavy medicinal Islay smoke.
100%. I think people could walk into this whiskey without knowing you know, what it is, are coming in as a peated whiskey and saying that that's not peated, because it's not your immediate association of it. But it is just a different style of peat. It is that matter of fact, right? But I think anCnoc as itself, I think, as a new make spirit, we talk about this. Lucas, who's my boss, who used to do the same role as I did for Inverhouse, he's been with the company for 12, 13 years now. But we always talk about Gordon Bruce as a distiller is technically, I think, one of the best distillers in the world, not just Scotland. I think technically his understanding, his background is just, it's astounding at how he discusses and talks about the distillation process. And it's amazing when you talk to master distillers and they say, oh, my job's really boring, because it's about doing the same thing every day, right? It's continuity, because if that goes wrong, you know, as soon as we introduce in a cask, it's anyone's game, right? You know, we can control this and we understand the rough directions it's going to go, but we all know casks can go in complete tangents. And that's, you know, if you've tried single cask stuff, I didn't think a sherry butt could ever taste like this, right? So I think technically as a new make spirit is one of the best technically, but again, that's subjective, right? It might not be to your palate, you might love it, but it's from that understanding, I think it's a solid new make that then goes into the casks.
Yep. And then the anCnoc new make's kind of light, fruity kind of new make.
Yeah, it's this really lovely balance. I said it was kind of that off-centre in terms of if we look at take the polar opposites of Glenmorangie and Macallan, it's that off-centre, I would argue, but it has that very, I wouldn't say very viscous, but it has a slightly viscous base, but pulling those esters forward, those more citric and arguably floral notes that are coming through on it. And because of that balance, it works quite well in both bourbon and sherry. If Gordon could put in anCnoc new make into bourbon cask for the rest of his life, he would. Like that's all he wants to put it in is bourbon casks. That's it.
I mean, but you know, talking about Gordon, he's a man of tradition as well. But the kind of slogan of anCnoc is the kind of modern tradition.
Yeah.
Does that affect the process? Because it's this kind of thing of looking at the past and kind of, you know, the stills are still the same stills that were there right from when Noctu was first originally started up.
Yeah.
And it's trying to kind of, you know, the labels of the anCnoc, I haven't got one here with me, but they're very kind of modern, kind of slender and sleek and kind of, you know, they're very nice looking, but kind of minimalistic, and it's kind of hinting towards the future. But then it's got this very kind of traditional aspect about it, especially within distillery. Talk to us about that and how it affects the process.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily the process, I would argue, but it probably goes towards the cask side of things, right? So, I mean, casks make up, I mean, there's always arguments. Is it 75%? Is it 2/3? Is it 66? But around that area is your cask's influence on flavour and character. So I would argue that it's what we do with anCnoc and the craft side of things and what we have coming up that I'm very aware this is recorded and cannot talk about. Trying to think if there's anything that we can, but no. There are a few things in the pipeline within the next 12 to 18 months that are coming with anCnoc that I'm very excited about.
We've all signed on Pour and Sip. Everyone signed an NDA. So for any time anyone comes on board, you can say anything about new releases.
I'm sure after this amazing Highland Park and the Q&A at the end, there might be a slip of the tongue. I'm sure Martin might get out at me, but no, there's amazing things coming, and I think it comes down to that, where it's, as you say, the stills are still the same. We still do a long fermentation, and that's been in place for quite literally over 100 odd years. So that's all still in place, but I think it's what we do with it, as you say, the branding and then the cask maturation. I'm very careful what I'm saying here, and finishing that we're going towards to do. That's where it comes into play as a modern whiskey, and it's not a whiskey that's designed to satisfy the masses as much as obviously we'd love that, and I think it does that in a certain way. Our allocation for specific customers and specific markets, we want to make sure that it's a whiskey that people still discover. You know, your entry level whiskies are your entry level whiskies, but I think this is a whiskey that people can come across and go, that needs to be on my shelf. You know, I love that dram.
Yeah, it's not that kind of supermarket whiskey that you're going to go to the shelves and it's one that you just take off the shelf. It's one that once you've tried a few whiskeys and you want to go further into it, you know, you kind of find the kind of stuff with good presentation like this and the kind of non-chill filtered, you know, no added colouring, bottled at 46%, and, you know, all of these kind of things that are kind of us whiskey drinkers and us whiskey snobs to a certain point, you know, really, really appreciate. And that's the kind of stuff that we really like and that we want to get on board with. And we get these kind of ties with brands, you know, that those ones that do it in this way, as you can see behind me, I've got mine to Springbank. Just a few more comments because I am aware of the time and we have tons and tons of comments coming in. Sean McCarrick, initially sweet, then savoury with increasing spice and a drying finish. El Sutton agreed. I'm getting loads of sweet dried fruit after a drop of water. David Stanton, palate, cinder toffee, mocha and winter spices. Jeffster, it's a long finish after adding the H2O. Found it spicy when neat. Joe F, you guys are correct. The nose opens up so much with 3 droplets of water, then sweet fruit, mostly rain and orange with more banana. What do you think about it? I mean, did you add water to this one before you poured it, after you poured it?
Yeah, I have in the past. I've just added a tiny bit there, but the interesting, and I'm glad people are talking about adding water, it will change the whiskey completely. Especially when we're looking at peat and all of these whiskies, I would encourage, it's entirely up to you, of course, but I would encourage you to add a little bit of water because especially with the level of volatility and the level of alcohol that you're going to be experiencing throughout this, it will change it dramatically. And because it's that intense peaty flavour, right? So no, I do encourage that, but I always add, for new whiskies that I'm trying, I'll always add a little bit of water just to see if it changes, and see the ones that are the worst are the ones that I prefer the nose of with water and then the taste of neat, because then I've got to sit with 2 glasses, nose one, drink the other. But it will change, and whether it changes completely for the better in nose and palate and finish, or if, you know, maybe the nose is better for you, the palate. But that's what I think is truly wonderful about whiskey. It just gives you that depth and understanding and character.
Absolutely. I mean, I like to, especially with these ones, I like to try them, especially with a small sample. I do like to try them neat a couple of times at first before I'm going to add water. I'm very frightened of drowning whiskey in water and then kind of spoiling it for myself for having added too much.
Yeah. We've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there. Absolutely. Yoza Hughes, love Peat smoky whiskies. This is definitely one to get. Colin Bell agrees. Reverend Kevin Wright, buttery. Sean McCarrick, this is a lovely dram. David Stanton, tannic oak, citrus peels and earthy peat. Green tea is green. Taste it now. This is a warm Saturday evening in a snug bar with a roaring fire kind of dram, with roasted game aromas wafting up from the kitchen. This is another one with the game roasting game. Absolutely amazing stuff. I mean, I love people when they make tasting notes that have a kind of a time and place it brings you to. This is one where I'd sit on a snug sofa in a bar with a warm fire, or this is one I'd be walking down a beach and I can kind of smell that beautiful sea air. You know, I think those are great tasting notes when you kind of put yourself in a time and place or a kind of memory.
100%. I mean, that's what's so beautiful about it, right? Because we can talk about tasting notes, and I find it really difficult. And I always say, start big and work your way down to the point and say, categorize it. Is it sweet? Great. Is it fruity? Right, perfect. It's fruity, but is it tropical fruit? Is it orchard fruit? Is it berries? And there's a way to do that, right? But the whole idea about time and place, the example I always use, my gran had a very specific perfume that she used to wear, right? And it was discontinued in the 90s. And she passed away when I was about 9 years old. But every so often I smell that perfume and I'm immediately transported back to being very young in her kitchen while she's cooking. And it's a very personal, emotional response to a smell. But that's what fascinated me, I think, and kept me going in this path of drinks in that industry was wine, whiskey, rum, tequila. I think we've all experienced it at one point, is smelling something that's very unique and very personal to us. And that's what makes every country in the world has a bread, a sword, and an alcohol. And that's what makes it so ingrained in our culture, is not just that, but it's the emotional response that we have to liquids and food.
Absolutely. I think that's really profound as well. I think it's absolutely those kind of memories that whiskey can bring of your childhood even. It's literally that. It can go back that far, like you say, 9 years old. Smell that puppy. It's really an amazing thing. Joe F, this is a glorious dram. It's so well balanced with the sweet fruit, the oaky spice, and then there's the lusciously smooth smoke that just grows on the finish. Joe F, that's another buy. Mike Pizarro, so 30ish, I had a summer job at a place which sold barbecues just opposite the Mars factory. Okay. Okay, fine. I thought you worked in the Mars factory. I was like, why does it smell like pizza? Gerard McNeely, really nice texture. Jeff said it's a bit like liquid chorizo for me.
Yes.
I've tried liquid chorizo before.
I could get on board with that.
Yeah, you could. Okay, fine. Maybe I couldn't. Chorizos, yeah, I'm actually getting that. There's that smoked meat kind of thing as well. That kind of kind of vibe that I get from this. Absolutely. Ian Turner, thanks, Andy. I thought I was losing my taste, but the smoke is not coming through for me. Was expecting a big punch looking at the tasting notes. Yeah, it's not like, this isn't at all a peat monster. You know, like a.
I think the peat's definitely there, but in a very, and probably in a guise that most of us assume is going to be Isla peat, right, or what we immediately associate with Isla peat. But no, I think the smoke is definitely there. But again, it's all subjective, right? Everyone's more attuned to different notes than others. So, but it's there, but as I say, in a very different way than what we're probably used to, or what we normally associate with the word peat, as this is aptly named.
Absolutely, yes. Last few comments before I go, before we move on to our next dram. Ian Jambo Rain really enjoyed this dram. Perhaps wouldn't have considered it if I was looking for a peaty whiskey, but definitely will now. Fantastic stuff. Ian Turner, Green Tea, is saying, yes, this is a surprising whiskey. Reverend Kevin Wright, that is a very, very attractive whiskey. Not too complex, but plenty of gentle smoke and then a smooth, sweet, oily, syrupy palate. Mike Pizarro has now added the right amount of water and he's loving this. Green Tea is green. Adding water is curious, changes the nature of the taste completely. The sweetness comes to the fore. The savoury moves a touch back. That's really interesting. Ellie Wilson, wood smoke on your clothes after coming in on a cold November evening. Interesting. I've never had, I mean, maybe there's just growing up in London. I've never had wood smoke ever coming back, and maybe just from when I was younger, maybe kind of cigarettes from a kind of under 18 or something like that. Mike Pizarro, well, the dram is gone and now I'm sad. And now I can see a clock also on the WhatsApp, which I assume means move on. Thank you very much, Stuart, for coming on and chatting with us. It's been lovely to talk to you and try this dram with you. If you stay around till the end, you can we can have a general whiskey chat with the four of us here. So I'm going to welcome back Christy now.
Hello, how are you doing?
Good. Did you enjoy the dram?
I loved it, and I actually loved Eddie's comment at the end, because growing up in the countryside in Sussex, that wood smoke vibe when you come in on a cold night, I think that they nailed that. That was like the perfect note for me.
Okay. Like I said, I came back smelling of very different things when I was young.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Stuart, for chatting us through the dram. And do you come back at the end for a little bit more of a whiskey chinwag?
Absolute pleasure, and will do.
So good. Speak to you in a bit. Well, my goodness. What is up with time this evening? Time is a construct, I swear.
Was that you who wrote the clock on the WhatsApp?
I was. I am very aware. It's nearly 10:08 and we have a whole nother dram to get through.
We do.
But
absolutely.
Before we move on, somebody mentioned something about why does it make me sneeze? And I wanted to bring that back with a little ABV alert, because the next dram is 63.9% ABV. Do not be scared, though. Do not be scared, because we will talk about ABVs. We will nose it gently. Just don't stick your nose too far in the glass. You have been warned.
Steve Williams says this dram is lovely, finished with Edam, Christy, wrapped in Serrano ham. And needed eating. So, yes.
Hashtag cheese envy, I can see in the comments as well. But without further ado, because I could go down a cheese board rabbit hole, and we've already well down a whiskey rabbit hole, I'm going to welcome Martin to the screen. Here he is. Hi, Martin. How are you doing?
I'm fine. It's good to be back.
Yes.
On the show. It was good to listen to Andy and Stuart. Some and fantastic tasting notes that came up there. It's good to hear all these, innovative notes that we didn't use in the past, which is really, really good. And it just tells us with all these different kind of tasting notes that comes up that there's no right or wrong when we taste whiskey. And I think that's amazing.
100%. It's all about the joy of the dram and our drinking experiences. So, Andy, do dram along, but we'll say bye to you for now.
Okay.
Now, crack on with the fifth and final, but by no means least dram of this month's box. We are taking a trip to Orkney.
Yes. We are going up to the northernmost Scottish distillery in the world, as we like to claim. We're going to taste the second edition of our Cask string series. This is the release number 2. As you said, 63.9.
Yes, it's a beast.
Well, it is when you look at the numbers and the ABV, but it's actually not that strong when you kind of let it breathe a little bit and give it some time, both drinking it, of course, and also just let it stand there and nosing it. Again, whiskey is made to be enjoyed, and how people want to enjoy it, it's up to them. But as we say, we made this our way, enjoy it your way, and that means if you want to try it with a drop of water or a splash of water or 50-50 or whatever, it's completely up to you. But it do, as Stuart rightfully said as well, water, whiskey will change, and so will this quite a lot. It's actually one of these whiskeys that, with some water, it actually gets a little bit more oily. It gets a little bit more creamy, and some notes. And the closer you come to the 40, of course, more and more flavors will be released. So again, no right or wrong, but it's definitely one of these whiskeys that when you taste it at full strength, it completely takes your thoughts and memories back to a warehouse where you just walk between the casks and try them and so on. So this is it's a wonderful dram, definitely.
Yes. And it's always a magical experience to be in a warehouse, for sure.
Yeah.
While we are nosing to our heart's content, tell us a little bit about you. You've come and chatted with us before, but if anyone doesn't know you, who is Martin? And tell us about your role at Highland Park.
Yeah, well, Martin is a Dane with Viking family, and fell in love with Scotland some 34 years ago.
I mean, very on brand with Highland Park to have a Viking in our midst.
Yeah. Probably sounds like an audition, didn't it? You know. But the fact is, I fell in love with Scotland in my young days, and worked for the Danish Navy. And
cool.
We were crossing the sea, and we were on an exercise around Edinburgh, and we had a day off, and I visit some of the battlefields, some of the castles, and as most of the people out there know, if you're driving around Scotland, eventually you will drive into a distillery. You have to.
You have to. You cannot miss them.
Nah. So, and that's what I did, and I became so fascinated, not so much about the whiskey itself and the flavors, but I actually got fascinated about the story and how proud the people that made it were, when they walked around. So even though they were rolling the cask in the warehouse, they were talking about their whiskey, and I've always been kind of a nerd, when something interests me, and I probably don't look like a typical nerd, but I really like to dig deep into the things and start reading about it. Went back to Scotland, started working at some of the distilleries, and eventually, of course, started doing tastings, which is now 32 years ago. I did my very first tasting.
Congratulations, because that is a lot of tastings. You must have spoken to a whole bunch of people about whiskey.
I've done a few during my time now, and then got the chance to work full time in the whiskey world in the airport in Copenhagen, and then later moved to Speyside, worked at the Craigellachie Hotel as a whiskey manager, and then was discovered by Idrington Group as a brand ambassador for first their portfolio, and then some years back I became 100% Highland Park and global ambassador for them. And now when we of course don't have this COVID thingy, I travel around the world approximately 200 days a year, spreading the gospel about our brand and loving it. It's a dream job. And I remember when Idrington confronted me and said, "You, sir, you need to be our brand ambassador." I felt like a football player were asked by a huge club to sign with them, and thought, yeah, I'm going to do that. So I love whiskey, and I love the stories. I love the industry, and love digging deep into flavors and where they come from. And Stuart said it absolutely amazing about when we talked about peat, that peat is not just peat. And I think when we talk about peat and we talk about distillers, we often see this thing about is there some kind of terroir in whiskey and so on, and mostly, of course, the people will refer to where the barley comes from or the water, whatever it can be, as there's no kind of rules or law of where the barley should come from, where there is when you do produce some kind of wines and these kind of things. Then I think the closest we can talk about terroir will be where we get our peat from, because it will make a difference depending on, is it Islay, is it St. Fergus in Aberdeenshire, is it Twintowel, is it Orkney, and it will all give different kind of flavors to the whiskey we produce.
And I 100% want to dig into this, because having been to Highland Park, and we'll talk about that in a second, you have a very distinct peat, but I'm going to quickly rattle through some comments and some questions. I'll start with a question for you from Gerard. Any clue on how old this is? This is obviously a no age statement dram. Can you give us a bit of an indication?
Yes, I can.
Oh, please may you.
Oh, good. Well, I can tell you it's, and this will be kind of a riddle, because it's older than the youngest whiskey we have on the market, but younger than one of our new releases.
I like this riddle. Okay, it's out there for pouring sippers. Please get your Sherlock Holmes hats on and report back.
And I will not say yes or no if you come up with the right answer, but
we might be able to tell from your face.
But you know, for the non-age statement whiskies, the NAS whiskies here, the cask string we have here is part of our core range. It will come out in different batches, but it will differ in ages. So some might be around the 12, some might be around the 8, some actually what we've been looking into, some older things about 15 and so on. And we like to give people this kind of voyage in the warehouse without being there. And I know it's not single cask, but it will be reflecting the different kind of flavors you will get when you go into a warehouse and open different kind of casks next to each other and so on. And that's what Gordon Motion, our very innovative whiskey maker, had in mind when he did this, but also, of course, give you the opportunity to, no matter what he's making here, having this DNA from Highland Park shining through all the way. I sound like a marketeer, and you know me well. I'm not a marketeer, but that's actually the whole idea behind this. That he can play around with the cask for this one here, and when I hope that people will kind of look away from the age thing here and take the whiskey for what it is, and actually. I know this is not the right word, but people know what I mean. Play around with the whiskey, you know, try different kind of strength of this, try it as it is to begin with, and then give it some time, give it some drops of water, let it stand there for half an hour, come back to it, and try all these kind of things and see how whiskey actually can develop in a glass, but also with some water.
Definitely. Yes. And that is what's super fun, I think, with cask strength or close to cask strength whiskies, because you almost have multiple whiskies in that bottle, which is so exciting. I'm just going to fly through some notes. So we'll try and go to people who maybe haven't heard so much from. David Stanton, nose, banana, honey, grapefruit. Joe F, milk, chocolate, honey. Oh, there's so many. Jared's talking about millionaire shortbread, which I love. Yoza Hughes, very subtle smoke. Feel like I'm on a heathland near a peat bog up in there, them hills, which I'm enjoying. Peter Gilmore, head and smell with Highland Park. Anyone else get that? Hold that thought, Peter. Hold that very thought. Chris Randall, oily pear drops on the nose. Tom Gillingwater, oof, that's got some punch. Yes, it's great stuff. We've got DS007, rich spicy fruits. That's hard for me to say. We've got Jeffster, blimey, that's found parts of my tongue and mouth I didn't know I had. Not in a bad way, but I think it needs some kind of warning on the bottle. To be fair, we did do this at the top. Simon's picking up almond. Green tea is green. Oh, and Mike Pizarro about it being hefty and treated with respect. I'm loving this. Michael Smith, it's warmed his ears up. And then Elle Sutton, maybe I should have eaten something this evening before trying the Highland Park. I mean, I think it's a beaut. I think it's a beaut.
Yeah.
The reason we said to hold the Heather thought, so I want to tell a very brief story, Martin, which you may well relate to. Flying into the Orkney Islands is a bit of an experience in that time with this buffeting wind.
A bit, yeah. So,
like this. And this is because it's very, very windy and there are no trees. And talking about terroir, this has an impact on the whiskey in our glass, right?
Yeah, definitely. And you know, Stuart mentioned as well there, you know, when we talk about peat, we talk about normally this kind of iodine medicinal flavor, the beautiful notes we get from especially Islay, and it will change as we go up through the mainland. We go to St. Fergus and to Mental, as I mentioned before. The things change there, and even if you go through the different kind of peat layers, and you can see there will be a difference in what type of trees that used to grow there, what type of bushes, and all these kind. There's even a flavor difference in between the different species of heather that grows around. And then if you drive up through the Highlands and your Pars, Balbrair and Pulteney, beautiful distilleries he talked about as well. You come up to John O'Groats, and if you don't stop your car, you'll drive into the water. So hopefully the ferry will be there. And then you come to Orkney, and I know we always say, well, there's no trees in Orkney, and it's kind of a lie, because we do have trees. There's actually a farmer up there, which his great granddad wanted to have something that no one else had in Orkney. So he planted trees in a little valley. So he had his own little forest.
Oh, I love this.
Yeah. But if we go to hobby store where we cut our peat, and we take the peat under a microscope and we look through all this, there's absolutely no traces of tree in this in our peat. We cut down to about 3 meters and have 3 different kind of layers that will give different kind of flavors: fog, jarry, moss. And we know that the the lowest layer down to what we call moss will be about 3,000 to 4,000 years old.
Wow.
But still, when we have had it down to Scotch Whisky Research Institute, we have to other places, there's no trees in the peat we have at all, even though it's decomposed through thousands of years. It just shows us that there was basically never trees in Orkney. So when we talk about Orkney peat, we talk more about heather.
Yes, exactly. So everyone who's been saying heather and florals, yeah.
And you know, in all peat there will be heather, but in to some extent, of course. But when you look at Orkney peat, Hobbyster peat, it's basically only heather, which is why when you, and we could hear there are some of the notes here as well with honey and these kind of things, and that's the flavor we get from our peat. That's heather. And the thing is, we have made some research, we have made some experiments, which have taken us up to a higher ppm than normal to see how this will turn out. And even though we would be at the same ppm like Lafroig or even Ardbeg, and even higher, which we have as well as research and experiments, the flavors we get with the same ppm will not be even close to Lafroig or Ardbeg and these kind of things, because our peat do not allow it. So people have to be careful now and again when they want to know the ppm, and I know exactly the same as the age, but the ppm is only kind of a technical measure. It doesn't really give you a full indication of the flavor or what to expect. So I think it's fantastic to talk about ppm now and again and these, but when it comes to Orkney, it will be very, very different when we talk about ppm, because we will, technically speaking, have the same or even higher in some of the products we will make in the future. but it will never ever be the same kind of smoke. It will be different.
I love this so much because I feel like I want to do a peat deep dive, like going to different parts of Scotland for the peat and comparing everything. So fascinating.
We did. If you go back in time, and we're talking about 20 years ago, something like that. Like a lot of other Scottish distilleries, we wanted to see if we could do production a little bit easier, probably even try to save some money and so on. So we stopped the floor malting for a while.
I mean, I have malted on the floor malting, so you have to have them.
Yeah, and we will continue because we found out we stopped the production of a floor malting for, I think it was about 8 months, and we got things, all the malt we got down from Baird's malt and Simpson's. It changed the flavors. So they were using the peat from St. Fergus or Tumental. At one stage, we actually cut peat in Orkney and sent down to Baird's malt. Still changed the flavor in our new make because it wasn't the right temperature, it wasn't the right humidity. There was a lot of other things. So we decided that if we want to create Highland Park with the flavor we have today and the flavor we had in the past, we needed to do the floor malting. We needed to dry and make it into our malt ourselves, transfer it from barley to malt at the Highland Park distillery, and that's what we do still today. So it's very important for us, and if the peat is wrong, well, Highland Park will be wrong. So it's very important.
And we cannot have that.
Nope.
Can I just say, I have severe FOMO right now because everyone's sending the tasting notes in, along with a very fascinating question, which we'll come to when everyone's back on the screen. But we have to have a taste, Martin. Like we talked about it, I'm very thirsty. Everyone is making me jealous. Cheers to you and to Highland Park.
Cheers. And just as with Stuart, this is the natural color. It's on-chill filtered. Yeah. Well, I won't give people a hint about tasting notes because they are absolutely amazing what's coming in. So, yeah.
I dived ahead because I could not resist. Wow. There is so much flavor in that dram. I'm like genuinely blown away. So much flavor.
It's a mix of American oak sherry seasoned cask, European oak sherry seasoned cask, and ex-bourbon cask. So quite a good combination, and where we get a really good balance will be from some of the refill cask we used as well. So yeah.
So give us, before I go through these notes, again conscious of time, give us a quick 30 to 60 second hot learning spot about what a refill cask is.
Well, a refill cask is either a cask that's been used for sherry and used at least one time for Scotch whiskey. So a sherry seasoned cask, American oak, European oak, used for Scotch whiskey one time, we use it again, and when we use it again, it's a refill cask. If it's a bourbon cask, exactly the same. It's when it's used one time for Scotch whiskey, it's a refill cask. And when it becomes a refill cask, that means after the first filling, it kind of loses its identity. It's no longer an American oak and European oak, a bourbon cask, a sherry cask. It's a refill cask. And terms like second fill, third fill, fourth fill, fifth fill doesn't exist. It's a refill cask. So, and the reason for that is basically when we use the cask for the first time, it's the cask we get in from Spain or from Kentucky. When this cask has been used once, when we have to use it again, we might have to replace a cask end or a stave, and that means we can put in American oak as a cask end in a European oak cask, and that's why some of these have to change and loses its identity.
I mean, that's so interesting. And in terms of flavor delivery, you can use refill cask to balance, to maybe not give so much, because let's not forget, obviously this is a single malt. We're talking from Highland Park here, single meaning one distillery. But you've still got multiple casks and barrels and butts going into these things. So you've still got such an important blending element.
Yeah, but I think Stuart agree with me, Matt, that sometimes if you only use one type of cask, you will also find that the whiskey will, in some cases, be a little bit one-dimensional. You will have some flavors that will be overpowering. If you use a first fill European oak sherry seasoned cask and a high proportion of first fill cask there, you will see that it could be a little bit too much dry fruit or sherry notes, but you can then kind of mellow it out a little bit and give it a really good balance. And it's not like, I'm not talking about making it boring, because you can still play around with a lot of flavors, but it's just that the refill cask is there to give it a really, really good balance. The other things like first fill sherry seasoned cask or first fill bourbon is there to give it complexity as well, to put it in as these. So it's like an orchestra. You need to hire all these kind of things, and at the end it will become one big melody. But if you take some of the parts out or you put new parts in, that's where you have to find the balance. So it's still music. Yeah.
What an analogy. So, right, let's come to your notes and your thoughts, because there are so many. So Ian Jambo Rain, neat, that is really intense, sweet, spicy, slightly smoky, burny goodness. Gonna have to dilute a little now though. Tom's getting some dark rum. Chris Randall, definitely a dram for special friends and occasions. David on the finish is getting spicy, lingering pepper and golden syrup. Malcolm Tucker, let me come to you, has a theory about your riddle. He says the age could be between 10 Viking stars and 15 Viking heart. He has done his research, I feel.
You are not far away from the truth, my friend.
Well done. I'm going to take that as a well done. Ian Jambo Rain's on a few drops of water. Black Forest Gatto aftertaste for Craig. Colin Bell, a proper grown-up drink, spice, pepper, and chili. My gums certainly know I've had a drink. Long-lasting finish, which will stay with me for a long time. Reverend Kevin Wright, the peatiness in this Highland Park is certainly very subtle and sweet. Despite the ABV with a little water, it's lovely. Sean McCarrick, this is going to be a tough choice tonight. And then, yes, lots of indecision about how to rank these drams. So, quick question for Martin before we bring the whole crew back for our very insightful question. Malcolm wants to know if this is a peaty glass. What's a peaty glass? I feel like I've missed the memo on this.
Can you repeat that?
He wants to know what type of glass you're drinking from.
Oh, the glass. Well,
the glass.
Yes. Well, these are actually the official Highland Park glass, if we may say so. We discovered these glass a while ago, and you can see it's almost like a Cupito glass, but without the foot. And one of the reasons we like to use these is because, as you mentioned before, it's quite windy in Orkney, and if it stands here on the foot, it will blow away. So we keep it close to the table like this, and like it's the same shape. It's just without a foot. So we do use them at Highland Park as well after the tour. Yeah.
Safety first. We've got to keep those drams safe.
Definitely, it's very important, and it is also very windy in Orkney, so we need to be careful when we pour our whiskey.
Amazing. So just to round up, it's a lovely complex whiskey, so much happening with small glass from Chris. Colin's getting licorice, aniseed notes and honey, lots of spice, beautiful dram. And the Jeffter, considering the ABV, this is not an expensive purchase from the Pour and Sip store. I like it, Jeff Steve. Give me a segue to say that you can get all our drams in the Pour and Sip store with a member discount, no less. So yes. Martin, this has been such a joy. Thank you for coming back and hanging out with us again.
My pleasure, as always. And just give me a call. I'll be back again.
Excellent. Well, we'll definitely have you back. I'm going to bring back Andy and Stuart as well, because I think it's about time we had a bit of a whiskey chit chat. Hi, both. How are you doing?
Oh, good. That was, Martin, thank you. That was, well, I should say thank you to you guys, I guess. You packaged it up, but delicious.
Yeah, it's good. But I must say I had the pleasure. I was at the whiskey fair in the Border Shop a few weekends ago, and Inverhouse was there with Pulteney and Speyburn and so on. And you mentioned the Speyburn 15 and the 18. Cracking whiskey, absolutely amazing whiskeys. And then I always been, and Malcolm up there knows that, I've always been a blocker for Pulteney. It's one of my favorite drams of all time. That's Pulteney's. I really enjoy that. So it was good. It's good to taste.
That associated Viking heritage.
And and it was good because we had stands next to each other, so they had a few drams of Highland Park, and I had a few drams of yours, so which was really good. So I think there's a lot of fantastic things happening in the whiskey industry at the moment. Innovation is there, but it also seems like a lot of the distilleries today are looking back. Traditions, they're looking, as you mentioned, with every distilleries in the past would have used peat. Used peat, and it seems like it's not because it's only a trend with all these peat. It is about traditions as well, and innovation and traditions in the whiskey industry is not a bad thing. It's a great thing. It's a great thing. And also I love the love that the whiskey industry has for each other, and appreciating that good whiskey doesn't just come from one or two suppliers, it comes across the board. And we all want a collection of drams, which is fantastic. Yeah, but I think, and Stuart, you agree with me, when you look at especially ambassadors and so on, when we travel around the world, we are definitely not competitors. We are one big family and we are colleagues. I think the big competition is the marketing people, who can come up with the best advertising or these kind of things. But for us, I've been doing fairs where some of the ambassadors from other companies have been sick. Don't know why, but they've suddenly been sick, and I have to do their masterclass, which and we do that because we love the industry, and that's what it is.
I think it would be great though.
Sorry, I didn't go.
I think it would be great though if there was this rivalry. It's like the kind of West Side Story kind of rivalry, and you all kind of came into the airport kind of clicking at each other, and just kind of this kind of general.
As you say, it's literally just the marketing.
Where In the House come up against Edrington, and there's this kind of crazy rivalry at the airport.
I really wouldn't want to fight Martin.
Let's go back to Martin's history, possibly.
You might run faster than me, and that's an advantage.
That would be my objective. Yeah.
Christy, were you going to come back to that comment? Do we have time for that comment from Stephen Coleman?
Yeah, totally. So while everybody's thinking about not just their dram of the night, their dram of the box, Steve Coleman Williams asked such an insightful question, and it's a really complicated one, but I think it's an interesting thing to talk through. It'd be great to get your views. I have a view. A question for later. With the peated whiskies, etc., how are the distilleries addressing the carbon footprint of it all? Don't get me wrong, my love of peat, but it does lock in a lot of carbon, which is a really interesting question. I think especially in the current climate crisis, like everything we consume has an environmental impact. So yeah.
I think from our point, but I probably was more speaking like a whiskey industry as a whole, but it's the one thing I love about it, that the industry, I'm speaking when I say we, I'm talking about the industry, is that we're one of the most sustainable industries in the world. And it's something that I find very important in my life. And I did my dissertation on food waste and its management, and it's something that's a really important part of my life. But one of the reasons I enjoy working in the whiskey industry, and it's a big part of it actually, is the fact that it is one of the most sustainable, and it invests so much money in being one of the most sustainable industries in the world. And with regards to peat, this is something that I think was probably noticed prior to the UN's establishing the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. I think this is something that was even identified way back then, that peat is a finite resource that, as Mark was pointing out, when you get to that third meter, you're looking at 2,000-3,000 years. I mean, we can't wait 2,000, 3,000 years to create another peated variant, right? So it's something that was identified a very long time ago, but it is making sure that it's a sustainable process in harvesting and harvesting peat in such a way that it is. And then of course, like now when you look at, we've got industrial maltings, right? And that's where the majority of these peat is passing through. So it's now more centralized instead of us, Highland Park, Lefroy, all not talking to each other and just doing it. You know, it is we do communicate, and as Martin said, the only people that don't like each other in the industry are the marketing departments. But with regards to production, everyone else are sharing ideas and sharing concepts that are only bettering everything that we do.
Yeah, but I think we one of few distilleries left that still cut our own peat, and we saw this coming years ago, and Marie Stanton, our manager, took over a project actually all the way back from when Russell Anderson were there to keep this sustainability project running with peat. And we are trying, you know, when we cut, as you say, down to 3 meters, and a peat grow 1 millimeter per year, it will take 3,000 years. And I'm not sure if you get older, if you drink more whiskey, or you get younger, but we can't wait that long, and we have to see, and there's things we can do. And Marie Stanton actually looked into this, and we are allowed to cut 300 ton peat per year, but we haven't done that for many years, because she looked at the fire, and since more or less 1798, when we were founded, the guys just threw peat in, and you saw flames, and there was and when there's a lot of flames, you don't really create the amount of smoke. So Marie did a few experiments about less peating hours and less flames, so the guys had to keep an eye on it all the time, and we're now down to more or less half of what we're allowed to cut. We are using less peating hours. We get higher ppm, and we get the same quality in our new make spirit just by changing a few things and looking at that. And as you mentioned, Gordon Bruce being a fantastic distiller, and this is not a competition, but we have Marie, which is a true nerd on these kind of things with yeast and peat and floor malting. What can we do to make it even more efficient? And also looking at these things that we now have to look at, because it's 2022, and we are moving forward to a better world, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so. And it's truly fascinating. So for me, I'd be interested to get everyone's take on this, actually, because I can be a bit of an overthinker, which is good and bad. But one of the things I think about sometimes is, what if there was almost like a way to include peat flavor compounds in whiskey? You probably couldn't call it whiskey because it'd be an additive. But if you have the same drinking experience without burning the peat, what do you think? This is for everyone watching and for you guys. Like, it's a pretty radical departure from using actual peat, but what do we think?
On you go, Martin. Sorry, you're about to.
Nah, well, I think, and I hope, Stuart, you and I agree, and we talked a little bit about terroir of peat and these kind of things. And if we have to use kind of artificial smoke, I don't think you will get the same diversity in smoky whiskey. I think you will, at the end, if we have to use artificial smoke and these kind of things, I think we will all end up being just one brand in different casks, to be honest, one flavor in different casks. So I rather want to cut down and, let's say, make a bit less of the peated whiskey, and then still have the diversity and our character, our DNA from the different distilleries. It would be a shame if anCnoc should, start using Orkney peat, because that's the last peat source that's left. So we have to be careful with the peat sources we have around Scotland. But I honestly don't hope that we have to use artificial smoke in our whiskies as long as I live. And I bear to see the peat that I cut grow up again. So, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know if you had a thought on that, Stuart. I think it's an interesting thing, and probably the right thing to use less peat, source it more thoughtfully, smoke for longer, try and find ways that way.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Martin. I think that's really well said. I think if we ever get to that point, I'd like to think we never get to that point. I would rather, as Martin says, scale back, or I would rather take the sacrifice of just not using it at all, because I think everything that Martin says is correct. It would just become this very unilateral profile, because it would be, you would lose that rustic concept. You know, the reason that we distill a malt whiskey specifically, is because it's rustic, rough flavour, right? You're getting all these different variables that come into it. And that's not to say column still whiskey is not amazing, right? Of course it is, but that's part of the reason that we love it. And as Martin says, I completely agree. I'd rather just cut back or not use it at all than go for artificial, to be fair.
Amazing.
I totally agree with both of you. I think
you're all right there, Andy.
yeah, I'm fine. I totally agree. But I think we have to get to everybody's comments about which their favourites have been.
We do, because somehow it's like 8:45 and we need to go through the drams of the box.
Absolutely. Mike Wally loved both the drams tonight. The Highland Park is lovely, but a bit full on. The anCnoc, definitely the best in this month's box. Alistair Taff, Highland Park overall for me. Martin and Stuart aren't going to be offended, by the way, if anybody is choosing not their dram. Jonathan B. anCnoc for me. Al Sutton, tonight it's Highland Park for me. For November, it's the Old Perth. Ian Jambo Rain, #1 Starwood, so it's obviously been Pour and Sip exclusive, that should go without saying. 2 anCnoc, Highland Park #3, 4 Cotswold, and 5th Old Perth, but barely a whisker between the top 4. Reverend Kevin Wright, I'm struggling to choose, but if I must, I'll go for equal, first Starwood and then Highland Park. Steve Hicks and Old Perth for me, just showing that blended malts can be as good as well, followed by Cotswold. Yoza Hughes, can't decide between anCnoc and HP, subtle yet satisfying, a draw. But the HP will definitely kick your backside. That it will. Christy, do you want to go for the last few there?
I'm struggling, so we've got up to be honest. There are so many notes come through. So, TACD, anCnoc favourite for me tonight. Tom Gillingwater, he's got the medal emojis out, so bonus point to you. anCnoc Gold, Highland Park Silver, Old Perth Bronze. Green Tears Green is having a bit of a debate here with Mike. You know that Cotswold was lovely, a subtle drama, my favourite from session 1. Sean, I enjoyed the anCnoc, but the Highland Park shades it for me. In third place, maybe controversially, is the Old Perth. No controversy here. We love them. anCnoc for Steve. For David Stanton, he can't separate anCnoc, Highland Park, or Old Perth. He loves them all. Bruce Edwards, hard to pick the favourite of the box. They were all so good, but if I had to choose, it would be the Cotswold by a slim hair. Crumbs, a Welshman voting for an English whiskey. It's all right. We'll keep it on the down low. Steve says Starwood for the month. Ian says anCnoc tonight, Cotswold overall. Apologies if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. Anulja, Starwood, Cotswold, anCnoc, Old Perth, Highland Park. A good selection this month to make the decision difficult. That's what we like. We like to make life difficult for you. Malcolm, anCnoc, Green Tears Green, anCnoc, Cotswold overall. SW Tractor Boy, match tied tonight. I'm heading off to the member store for extra time. I like it. I like it a lot. Andy, any more from you?
There's just a couple more. Mike Pizarro, I think if I was only able to have one of this month's ever again, I would take the Highland Park. But the Starwood would be a very close second, then the anCnoc, then the Old Perth. Chris Randall, I have to say both of the drams tonight have been excellent. I would have both the different occasions. Pat Cowling, Starwood, Nigel Gain, impossible to choose, so will not. There you go. And Craig Jones, lastly, definitely the Highland Park for him. So,
can I just say, I'm enjoying Nigel's sass right there. I will not choose.
It's like so strong.
Well, it just shows us, you know, that the good thing about diversity and what we talked about, don't make the whiskey the same all the way through. We need to have different kind of flavors from now till the end of when we drink whiskey. Otherwise, we will all belong to one big company, and we don't want that. We still want to have a little bit of competition here. So,
long live the whiskies, I say. This has been an absolute joy this evening. I cannot believe what has happened to time. Where has it gone? How have we been chatting for an hour and 20 minutes?
We've gone well over.
We've gone well over, but it has been a joy to chat with both of you. I feel like we've been on air for 20 minutes. What's gone on? Thank you so much both for coming to talk through your whiskies on our peated evening. I've loved it. I don't know about you, Andy.
I've loved it as always. I think both drams tonight have been excellent, as well as this month's box, which has been one of my favourites. So I mean, December's going to be pretty magical as well.
Wait, on that note, Andy, bear with us. December is coming, so don't forget. Ta-da! I've refrained from opening it. We have our Pour and Sip advent calendar. I have been told that there may be some kind of instructions to follow in terms of opening, but I would say go day by day and compare notes. I'm very excited for this, by the way. I actually can't wait. I'm going to leave it there for now.
And we've got one tasting session in December.
Oh, yes. So mark your diaries, folks. 16th of December. The December box has got 5 drams like usual. Don't fret. But we're going to have a Christmas party on the 16th. And all things being well, Andy and myself will be there in person, which I cannot wait for. Can you imagine? It's so good.
Yes, I'm going to have to do Pour and Sip, not in my jogging bottoms.
Are you in your pajamas every week, Andy? Is this a revelation?
I'm in suit trousers.
Yes. So I can't wait. 16th of December, we're going to do all 5 drams in one session. We'll have guests galore. We might have some maybe party games. It's going to be really fun. It's going to be really, really good fun, and I cannot wait.
A real Christmas extravaganza. That's ages away. It's like a month away.
I'm actually quite upset about that. That's the downside. We have a long time to wait, but it will be worth the wait for sure.
Worth the wait.
Worth the wait for sure. Amazing. In the meantime, you can watch the videos back. Don't forget to check out the content on Pour and Sip Digest for an even deeper dive into the drams. And it's going to be really great. I'm just so excited for what's coming up. And thank you so much again to Stuart and Martin for making our Thursdays so effervescent and full of fun.
Yes. Thank
Absolute
you.
pleasure, guys. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Pleasure.
It's been great. Speak soon.